Let's begin by looking at what will likely dominate this summit. Everybody ahead of the summit has been talking about the currency wars. Is it the currency wars, stupid, if you like?
Well, it is clear from the run-up to the Leaders Summit that the currency wars have the issue of the currency wars has occupied the center stage, especially between the so-called surplus economies and the deficit economies such as the U.S. With U.S. firing the first salvo, having come down very strongly on the China's renminbi, as well as pushing for quantitative levels for current account surpluses and deficits. So quite clearly the climate is clouded by these issues.
Would you characterize it a war?
Well, I think it is a bit dramatic now to call it a war, but I don't think that consequences in the long term can be underestimated.
Lumkile, I see you smiling.
A war is for generals. This is...
What about the traders who are sitting in newsrooms and are firing on their computer buttons and sending currencies crashing?
Well, it has to happen. As Mzukisi has put it very clearly, that you've got countries that are running huge deficits and those that are running surpluses. In economic theory, we're supposed to see a shift, money moving away from those that have got surpluses into those that have got deficits. What is happening is that countries that have got deficits are printing money, and that money is flowing back to the surpluses. And that's really the question. And the question for me is, what do you do if there's a glut of money? As a developing country, as China, as South Africa, as India, what do you do when you've got a glut of money and you've got problems of unemployment, of poverty, and marginalization of the majority of the people?
Yeah, some have called it a wall of money that's attacking the emerging markets. Some have said it's a tsunami. Certainly, it's a lot of money that's coming to emerging markets. But apart from the currency issues, what are the other main issues, or is it just about the currencies?
Well, there are a number of issues, because remember that Leaders Summit is meant to be a confidence-building mechanism, because you don't expect heads of states and governments to take far-reaching decisions, because there are preparatory meetings to these things. You are likely to hear strong affirmations, or rather strong calls for a speedy conclusion of the Doha round.
Okay. So some trade issues.
Some trade issues as part of infusing confidence in a climate that is otherwise poisoned by acrimonious relations between major economies. Korea, for an example, has put forward a proposal to shift focus from traditional aid towards investment, towards trade, and towards infrastructure development. And this, of course, dovetails with what's been happening in Europe with fiscal consolidation. So those are some of the issues. I mean, there will be calls as well around questions of speedy resolution of issues related to climate change. The key question, though, I think which we should also be reflecting upon is what is not on the agenda and why. As you know, developing countries in general and Africa in particular have in the past been a center of attention. These are countries or areas that are heavily affected by development challenges, and these are issues that also are at the core of stability in the global economy, yet they are not so much prioritized.
What chance is there, in your view, of a strong, united, concerted action to resolve the issues that we've been talking about?
Well, the challenge that we have, to put it simply, is a crisis of leadership. There is a deep void in the global system. The US is not prepared to play a leadership role. It is shifting the burden to major emerging economies. It's been expressing a rhetoric consistently that with leadership, with power comes responsibility, essentially saying to these countries that they must come to the play. Yet the US itself is reclining inwardly, because if you look at its action of quantitative easing, it is currency manipulation, as the former Fed chairman Alan Greenspan asserted yesterday. So China also is wary of projecting itself as a leader because of what Mondli referred to earlier as some of the growth and development challenges that some of these emerging economies contend with.
So, deal or no deal?
There is not going to be a substantive framework with detail arising from the G20. In fact, the G20 brings about some sense of nostalgia if you think about the World Trade Organization, in particular the Doha round. These are the same leaders who could not muster courage to take decision for the conclusion of the round satisfactorily. I don't have confidence that they have a courage to put together a framework that is going to ensure global stability in the long term, precisely because they are focused on their own national interests rather than collective global challenges.
Lumkile, deal or no deal?
I agree with
No
Dr.
deal.
Qobo, no deal.
No deal.
No deal.
A lack of leadership.
There's no leadership. I mean, not only the leadership issue is not only, it's a global phenomenon. We see it in Africa, where Africans themselves are failing to strengthen trade ties and open up their economies so that we can have a very strong African economy that could compete when things become better in the global economy. So we need things here. Leadership in Africa has to think strategically, has to focus and use this opportunity of strengthening currencies to massify and bring people to work.
At the height of the 2008 financial crisis, I remember one of the CNBC US anchors went, President Barack Obama, are you listening? And share prices were falling. So I hope President Barack Obama can demonstrate whether he's listening or not. But to be fair to him, what we are seeing also at play here is a realignment of the global economy, if you like. We are seeing, as we've all observed, the emergence of your economic power, of your new economic powers, your Chinas, your Indias, your Brazils, your Russias, taking on the established order. And naturally, you'd expect there would be ructions, there would be fighting. Isn't that a demonstration of what we're seeing now?
There are two things. First, you can't underestimate the powerful forces at the domestic level. There is path dependence on the part of the US. The US, the Democrats in particular, are desperate to win the 2012 presidential elections. The economy has not been doing well. I think someone said if you were to put, I think it was the General Electric CEO, Jeff Immelt, said if you were to put democracy on the polls in the US, it would lose. Sorry, globalization on the vote, it would lose because there is dismal economic outlook. The economy is not doing well. Unemployment is rife, and this monetary stimulus, in part, is meant to address that. So the US has put primacy on domestic economic factors. Now, of course, there is a question of realignment. The major omission or weakness that we see in the alignment is that we did not have a sufficient confidence building mechanism, because there was a jump to the G20 leader summit at Pittsburgh in the wake of the global financial crisis without putting in place sufficient a platform for confidence building. It was a big mistake to let the G8 to go into a demise, because it had provided that platform of confidence mechanism, outreach to developing countries, tackling challenges related to Africa. No doubt in the long run it was going to ebb away anyway, but I think it was premature to accelerate the role of the G20 to the level where it is at now, because of the serious divergences within the G20, even amongst developing countries in the G20.
Lumkile, so if we are writing off South Korea November 2010 as an event and saying nothing is likely to come out of it, should we also be now perhaps writing the epitaph, if you like, of the G20?
Not yet, not yet. I still think that there's room, particularly coming from the emerging economies. If they get bolder, they do more. Because I think the shift towards inward looking policies. As Dr. Qobo was pointing in the US, we must see it also in emerging markets where there's really a confidence building in our economies, making sure that our people are well skilled, with access to the best of the skills, so that we level the playing field. Because for me, it's an opportunity to level the playing field because we've been begging the North for many years. It's now time. It's now our time. But for our time to really turn into a golden era, we need leadership. And unfortunately, in some of our countries, that's lacking. And therefore, we may miss this opportunity again and go back post-crisis and back to the North, which for me will be a lost opportunity.
Yeah, the question then that arises is that, are we then seeing African countries banding together and coming together and producing the necessary leadership that Lumkile is referring to?
Well, in the first instance, African countries are not sufficiently represented.
Well, President Zuma is there, and he is a leader of the biggest economy in Africa.
I think that that myth has got to be deconstructed. South Africa does not represent Africa in the G20. It is an African country, but it certainly doesn't carry the mandate of the African countries.
Is that a mistake?
No, it's not a mistake, it's an opportunity. It is an important opportunity for South Africa to project the challenges that African countries are contending with. Already, I think South Africa is putting forward a proposal for increased representation of African countries in the IMF executive board, to have 2 rotational seats, as is currently the case, and an additional permanent seat in order to have a strong voice of Africa in these multilateral institutions.
But don't we talk about us being able to exert more influence when we speak with one voice rather than us going and shouting at the top of their voices when we sing, when we're shouting singly, if you like? Isn't this an opportunity for South Africa to be joining together with the other big economies of Africa, your Nigeria, your Egypt, your Morocco?
Certainly it is, because these challenges that we see in the global economy, I mean, even if you look at the global financial crisis, the African continent was one continent that was heavily affected. And I think you are correct. South Africa should be building strong bridges with countries such as Nigeria and Egypt, major economies in the African continent, to cobble a common voice around how we deal or we tackle some of these global challenges.
For the record, G20 South Korea 2010, will it have any lasting or bring lasting solutions?
It will not bring lasting solutions.
It will not bring lasting solutions. Lumkile?
Agreed.